In 1980, Jacobs agreed to sell Linkabit to a high-tech conglomerate, MACOM, but stayed on as CEO. After a second merger and a change in management at the parent company, he left in April 1985.
The next day, my husband and I sent him a check for $100, I think, to get his mayoralty campaign started. Because we thought, if he's this good, he'd be great for the city.
Weeks later, with VITERBI and 5 other ex-Linkabit executives, Jacobs founded Qualcomm as a company with only one product to sell, the founder's expertise.
I do remember the very first contract we ever got at Qualcomm. In fact, I'm proud that I actually created that sale. It was for $1,200, and it was for Irwin to consult. Linkabit was like the prelims to the main event. It was the foundation, or to put it in more technical terms, it was the test bed. It was the test bed of the technology and the test bed of the management skills that became the hallmark of Qualcomm. And those same dedication, those same basics that applied at Linkabit are what applied and were successful at Qualcomm.
There was a wealth of talent that had been developed in San Diego, largely through Linkabit had grown quite large to about 1,500 people. And they were all anxious to continue to work with Irwin and myself. And there were opportunities. Amusingly, the first office was no better than our first office. It was off of Villa La Jolla Drive, above, I think, a cleaning establishment. But that only lasted about 3 months, and we had already leased space on Sorrento Valley Road.
Before long, Jacobs and his colleagues began to hone in on a business model that hinged on development of a wireless technology that originated with the military called CDMA, Code Division Multiple Access, a spread spectrum technology using coding techniques to allow many more users to use the same frequency, whether voice or data traffic.
The military version existed, I think, during World War II already, so it would have been the 40s, and certainly much more strongly in the 50s and 60s. Most satellite communications, for the Army at least, was direct sequence. So we had a lot of experience actually in both versions of CDMA.
Unlike Linkabit, which relied almost exclusively on federal contracts from the Department of Defense and NASA during its first 10 years, Qualcomm decided to focus on potential commercial markets for CDMA. But CDMA for cell phones was not yet on the drawing board. Instead, Qualcomm was approached by entrepreneur Alan Salmassi, who had a blueprint for creating a satellite network for trucking companies. He needed Jacobs and his team to develop a workable and affordable system for the satellite service.
He was our first commercial customer, and although at first it didn't look too realistic, largely because of the lack of financing, as time moved on, it became more and more real, mostly because of the product of the very talented group we had. And ultimately that became the Omnitrax system.
Qualcomm perfected the technology, purchased Salmazi's company OmniNet in 1988, and that same year launched Omnitrax, which went on to revolutionize transportation logistics. The satellite mobile communication system allows transportation companies to maintain real-time data communications with their trucks and to pinpoint and track the location of each vehicle via satellite. In the 15 years since that launch, Qualcomm has shipped nearly 500,000 commercial units to businesses in 39 countries on 4 continents. In the U.S. alone, more than 1,600 fleets use the system, and the Omnitrax Network Management Center in San Diego processes more than 7 million data transactions every day. The Omnitrax spread spectrum technology provided a technological foundation for future CDMA networks, and its profits gave Qualcomm the financial freedom to fund development and commercialization of Qualcomm's next big thing, CDMA digital cell phone networks.
Then from there, that already was a CDMA system, and the concept of using it for cellular popped up.
In the fall of 1985, Jacobs first suggested the use of CDMA for personal communications during a drive with one of Qualcomm's leading engineers, Klein Gilhausen, from Los Angeles to San Diego. He asked Gilhausen to look into it further, and the resulting work formed the basis for Qualcomm's first CDMA patent.
Klein Gilhausen came and talked to me about it probably in 86, 87. And I told him all the things that were wrong with practical application, and he and others, including Irwin, of course, found ways around it and solved the problem. And then we started building hardware and did our first demonstration, as I recall, in 89.
Even though Qualcomm could demonstrate its technology's clear superiority, it ran up against entrenched competition from makers of networks based on existing technologies. It was a major selling job.
This was a technology, CDMA, that was very hard to understand, even harder to explain. It was clearly one that had better performance, particularly in a multipath environment and especially at higher speeds. Irwin understood that clearly, but it was very hard to get the rest of the community to just embrace it straight out.
All of the powerful established technology wireless entities in the world wanted us at the FCC to order a certain standard for communication. And then there was this inventor who wanted us to just give him a chance to be in business. We said, you know, we've thought about this very, very carefully. Our ignorance is so vast that we feel that it would be going beyond even the standards of Washington for us to be imposing some kind of rule against Irwin Jacobs, whoever he might be. If he can invent something, he ought to have a crack at it. And I want to say once and for all, Irwin caused the confusion in the wireless industry. It was not me. I did not do it. It's his fault. This confusion is also known as innovation. It is also known as creative destruction. It is also known as creativity. It is what makes America great.
I think that one of Irwin's great traits was that he recognized this very early on in Qualcomm, and he projected ahead where this was very complicated technology, the CDMA, you know.
He had the vision to see where telecommunications was going, to see where satellite communications was going, to see the importance of CDMA, and put it all together.
It sprung CDMA on the wireless world, and this was a world that was not prepared to accept innovation, and certainly not that technology. And this is one of the cases where it never would have happened but for what Irwin did. And lest you think that that's a small achievement, let me just tell you that you were fighting the fiercest of forces, and Irwin somehow managed to prevail against almost all of them except maybe the European Commission.
While initially shut out of the European market, Jacobs scoured the world for countries which had not yet deployed cell phone systems on a large scale. Even before CDMA was deployed commercially in the U.S. market, South Korea seized on the technology and made it a cornerstone of the country's ambitions to become a wireless powerhouse.
The joint development contract was signed by my predecessor 1 year before I did, but it was exploratory, only $2 million contract. The one I signed was over $20 million. Qualcomm is unknown in Korea, so risking $20 million into one unknown company was really big risk for the country. Korea was the very first country in the world who accepted the CDMA as national standard. You don't have any other technology in Korea, no GSMs, no TDMAs. 100% of CDMA.
Because of entrenched competition from more widespread wireless technologies, Qualcomm had to do more than just innovate.
Well, that is, of course, the most exciting part of the business. If you have an idea, you can develop it, and then actually it becomes useful to people.
They were building handsets. They were building chips that go in the handsets. They still are building chips, and they're better than anybody's, and they've got the bulk of the market on that. They were building the infrastructure for the carriers to put out, to receive the signals and deploy them. They were bidding and acquiring spectrum, mainly outside the country, but also in the U.S., and that was partly to help get systems in foreign countries, and they were working with others in some various collaborations in order to actually build carrier systems abroad. And they were funding a lot of it, and this was essentially a soup to nuts operation.
Most analysts believe that protecting Qualcomm's intellectual property was one of Jacobs' key achievements in the 1990s, building a portfolio of protected innovations that would guarantee the company licensing royalties on all future products that are based on CDMA wireless technology.
One of the things Irwin did understand, I believe, is the importance of patents right from the beginning, and the importance of building on some foundation of strength. These CDMA patents are being leveraged extremely well, and I think they're extremely valuable. It's almost like Irwin has the patents on air travel, and everything else doesn't work as well.
It was not something we expected when we first began to look at the idea and develop it. You know, one always has hopes, gee whiz, this sounds very good, perhaps we'll convince some people in the industry to make use of it. The fact now that the entire world is accepting CDMA for their next generation of communications is just great as far as we're concerned.
Jacobs worked and traveled tirelessly around the world to promote CDMA as a global standard for the next generation of cell phones, and he succeeded with international agencies greenlighting 3 CDMA modes, or so-called third-generation 3G networks. CDMA 2000 evolved directly from Qualcomm's second-generation CDMA, a wider bandwidth variant called WCDMA, initially standardized in Europe as a next-generation successor to GSM, the most widely used second-generation wireless technology, which was based on time division multiple access technology, and a third variant called TD-SCDMA, now being developed largely in China. All 3 versions are based on Qualcomm CDMA technology and patents.
Other area that people have been, of course, concerned about is, can I use one phone wherever I might be throughout the world? And there have been different standards. There will always be different standards. We have 1 billion people pretty much on 2G right now in several different frequency bands. They will slowly migrate to 3G. However, by that time 3G itself will continue to evolve, so nobody can depend on always having the same standard. The way to solve that problem is to have the capability embedded in the chip in the phone, so as a subscriber one need not worry about the system to which you're connected. It will just automatically be picked up by the phone and operate properly.
The importance of Qualcomm's patent protection strategy became clear when arch-rival Ericsson decided to settle long-standing patent infringement claims in a deal that confirmed Qualcomm's ownership of the core technology in return for the San Diego company agreeing to sell its wireless infrastructure division to the Swedish giant. Again, Jacobs got the credit, and Qualcomm shareholders reaped the reward.
Really opened the floodgates, and it made Qualcomm, certainly that year, the #1 company on the NASDAQ. This was the case where he made a compromise. It was actually a better compromise for Qualcomm. It may not have been technically the ultimate thing he wanted, but in the final analysis, it was okay. It not only protected the downside, but it also improved the upside dramatically. He also understood the importance of striking deals. In fact, it's one of the things that Qualcomm has been remarkably good at, both in terms of its licensing and in dealing with other parties.
Among his most important deals to date, Jacobs negotiated with officials in Beijing and won access for Qualcomm's technology in the fastest-growing and largest cell phone market in the world. Now, with Qualcomm's 3G technology up and running in the U.S. on 2 of the largest cell phone networks, Verizon and Sprint, Jacobs and his company are gearing up for their next offensive, wireless broadband access to the Internet.
The experience, again, where 3G has been launched, and again, there are 60 million people out there using it at this point, 62 or so, is that indeed this ability to download different applications is turning out to be very popular. And so some people use it for playing games, some people use it for their business use. Ringtones have always been popular, but that's not enough to drive 3G clearly. And the key surprise, I think, has been the fact that people have been willing to pay some significant extra amount per month for the video downloads, for the video clips. And so in a sense, maybe if you're looking at revenue issues, that may turn out to be one of the killer applications.
3G phones already have a version of it, but Qualcomm's data-optimized CDMA will allow business travelers and others to use their PDAs or laptops on the run to surf the net at high speeds.
That supports data rates of up to 2.4 megabits per second, very high data rates.
The number of transistors on a piece of silicon just keep doubling every year and a half or so. The power goes down, the cost goes down, you can do all kinds of wonderful things. That's why the cell phones are becoming so powerful. And if you look at the chip we now put in a cell phone, the digital chip, it used to be, actually we used several chips just to make CDMA work, because CDMA is indeed exceedingly complicated to make all the right things happen. And then it got down to one chip. Now it's a fraction of one chip, and most of those transistors are now going into computing or into GPS receivers, multi-megapixel cameras, video coding, decoding, but a lot of that is the computing part. And so when you kind of say, okay, what's going to be happening over the next several years, I think the mobile devices, these portable devices we carry around with us, will just, I mean, we feel uncomfortable ever going without them.
While the initial market for high-speed web data access over CDMA networks is currently centered on entertainment, such as video clips and data transmission for businesses, Jacob says the technology will also bring the broadband web at reasonable cost to people who are today bypassed by the internet revolution.
Well, one of the very exciting aspects is we think it's going to help in solving the digital divide issue, where, for example, students in rural areas and poor areas will be able to have a cell phone with a reasonable sized screen, a high data rate connection to the internet, something that's low enough cost that they can not only use in school but take home with them. We think it's an important social responsibility as well as a business opportunity. Good afternoon. How are y'all doing?
Jacob's admirers and colleagues generally credit him with business instincts and skills that are rare among technology innovators.
He's a brilliant and innovative scientist, and he was a great teacher. Indeed, he continues to be a great teacher, but he has a flair for entrepreneurship and for business.
Leadership, innovation, brilliant ideas across the board. He also was capable of, before any of the rest of us, I think, any of the rest of the engineers, to fully understand business and financial details. And so, you know, he's a Renaissance man. He can cover a great deal of territory and learn very fast.
He and Joan were at our house once, and I was very proudly showing him an Edison phonograph, which I own. And I was opening it up and showing him the mechanics of it, etc. And he was interested, but he asked me one question, and it just floored me. He said to me, "How long did Edison have the market, and why did he lose it?" I don't know of any other engineer that would ask that question. And I think the success of Linkabit and Qualcomm is because Irwin asked questions like that.
Anyone who's seen Irwin speak knows his trademark is to hold up Qualcomm's latest cell phone, okay? But when it comes to Irwin, it's not just one product, but hundreds of products that he's responsible for.